I would like you to do one simple thing for me. Please move back in time, 15 years, to the year 1999. Early that year, a Polish game company called CD Projekt had every reason to be anxious about the premiere of the new game. Not actually their game, but their translation of a certain BioWare-made role-playing game. They had invested heavily, they had hired a great cast of well-known actors to record voices and so on and so forth. But, according to later reports, on the very first day, the sales of that certain computer role-playing game were as high as 18,000 copies, which would be roughly 2.7 million zlotys, or roughly $800,000 based on today's dollar value. And so, the game was a huge success. You can see one screenshot for the game here. And the question I would like to ask in this paper is, why did this game become successful? Why did other games from the computer role-playing and strategy genres, such as Diablo 2, let's say action RPG, Fallout 2, Age of Empires 2, Heroes of Might and Magic 3, why did these games become popular in the late 1990s, and why did they stay that way? Why did they keep being popular? I have a recording, I hope I will be able to use, of a famous line that I used as a part of my title. You must gather your party before venturing forth. It is in Polish.
Przed wyruszeniem w drogę należy zebrać drużynę.
Yeah, so we have just heard one of the most known lines from computer games published in Polish. So, yeah, that line is also still a cult one. And the question is again, why? I will be trying to answer this question sociologically using some methods from cultural sociology. A brief look at the years 1999 and the year 2000, you can see there that there are a lot of games in bold that were published in Poland in those 2 years. All of them, I think all of them, or nearly all of them, still enjoy a kind of cult status in my country. Very briefly, one of the methods that cultural sociologists may use for studying games is an approach by Wendy Griswold. The most important practical guideline for us today is the suggestion that a researcher should study all points of this diamond, so the creators, the audiences, the actual games, in this case, the cultural objects, and the social world, institutions, economic background, and so on. But more than that, a researcher should study the interrelations between all the 4 points of this diamond. So I will be trying to show some interrelations and take a look at all these four points in the diamond. I will also use a rating of games from one of the Polish portals. The first question to ask is who the players were. And let's move on to that question. There are 3 categories I would like to talk about. One of them is gender. Of course, most Polish players in the late 1990s in the computer role-playing and strategy genres were male. One reason for that was the association with tabletop role-playing games, which were quite popular in Poland at that time. Another possible reason is that teenagers or students had fewer household chores, and so they had more time, especially more uninterrupted time, to play longer games. And we could also name other reasons. What is important here is that I can't say too much about women playing Baldur's Gate, Fallout, and so on. And I can't talk too much about women playing games such as The Sims. So this talk only concerns a segment of the gaming population in Poland, possibly the most important segment for the gaming culture, the most visible one, the most readily available one, the one that the speaker here also belongs to. But there are other sectors, other segments that I can't tell you much about. This is an important caveat, I think. Another thing, the age of players. We could distinguish roughly 3 age groups related to those games. First, people born in the 1970s and the 1980s. We had a huge demographic boom at the turn of the 1970s and 1980s in Poland. So at the end of the 1990s, there were a lot of people who were teenagers, who had some spare time, or maybe they were students, they still had spare time. Now I think of that as a PhD student. In that period, playing was related to identity formation for many of them. I can still remember playing in Heroes of Might and Magic 3, gathering with a select group of people, putting a blanket on my head when it was my turn to act so that they wouldn't see where my city was on the map and so on. So some memories are still fresh, and I think a lot of people who are 30 or 40 now can still have this kind of memories, so it can still be fresh in their minds. Another group is the people who were born in the early 1990s. For them, it was more difficult to find their peers playing in the same games at the same time, because they didn't play the games right after they premiered. Some time passed from the premiere of Diablo 2 or Baldur's Gate before they could play. And also, they had fewer contacts related to hot seat gaming, to LAN gaming. The growing speed of internet connections and the growing availability of such connections might have been one factor that reduced these cult-shaping opportunities, so to speak. And the third group, born in the late 1990s, this is the group where the importance of old games breaks down. When I say old games, I mean the games from the 1990s, the role-playing games and strategy genres. And the third thing is social class. Very briefly, a lot of criteria needed to be met for people to be able to play. They needed to have parents who could afford a computer on which the games could be played. They needed to have money to buy the game, or maybe contacts and readiness, the informal networks that we heard about earlier today, to get pirated copies. They needed friends with relevant interests to talk to about the game, maybe to play together. All these factors increase the likelihood of people's playing the games that are the subject of this talk. So, gender, age, social class, the 3 factors are the 3 groups of features that we can attribute to the avid players of those games. Now, how do we know that old games became important and that they stayed that way? One of the possible ways to answer this question is to take a look at this graph. It sums up the data from a top 100 rating made by Polish gamers. That rating started in 2011 when games such as Diablo 2 or Baldur's Gate weren't really distributed anymore. And so one could think that the fact that there are a lot of games published in 1998 and 1999, this is the high point in the left part of the graph, the number of these games can be attributed to 13-year-olds discovering the classics in 2013. It is most likely that it was the old players, the 30-year-olds for instance, that entered the titles, that voted for the titles in that rating. And so we can see that the titles from the 1998 and 1999 are overrepresented, so to speak, in the top 100 rating. So this is one way to show the lasting importance of these games. And now, about the factors, this is the social world part, but there will be also something about the producers or creators, about the factors that made this kind of success possible. One of them was technological developments, and I would just give some examples. For instance, in the mid-1990s, companies started using CD-ROMs on a much larger scale, and BioWare's Baldur's Gate is a good example. It was sold with 5 CDs, I think, in Poland. Then the greatly improved visuals, graphics, things like that had an important influence on the development of games. And of course they did, but it should be mentioned, it should be taken into account as one of the important factors. Another factor related to the cultural objects, so the games themselves, was their place in genre history. This was related to the social world, to the publishing aspect. For computer role-playing games, we have a kind of a breakdown in the mid-1990s, where the gold box games like Champions of Kryn stopped being published. And then BioWare with Baldur's Gate, also Fallout, another important title, fills in that gap and establishes a kind of new canon for computer role-playing games. And also real-time strategies, the genre appeared in the 1990s. So the period we are talking about was for these genres a kind of a formative period, a period of canons being established. Another thing, if we take a look at the table here, the rightmost column, you have the years when Polish gaming companies issued their first titles, possibly the translated titles, but still. There is a start in 1995, roughly. There is one in 1994, I think. But generally, in the mid-1990s, the growth of the publishing market in Poland starts, and you could track it down as I tried to do in that kind of table. And of course, the fact that there was a huge number of people from the demographic boom helped publishers to find the market for their titles. This is Piotr Frączewski. This is the person employed by CD Projekt to read that line, you must gather your party before venturing forth in Polish. Still a kind of a cult figure for Polish gamers, I think. I will skip gaming periodicals. I just named them as an important communication space. And I will note that recently there has been a successful crowdfunding project in Poland for the periodical Secret Service, which is also another sign of nostalgia of today's 30 or 40-year-olds for the time when we were young and we were in a land of magnets and miracles and so on. And a final word. There hasn't been much time to talk about all kinds of interrelations between factors, so I have treated some of them in isolation, but we could now try to draw a kind of a map and to show connections, like the ones I wrote about at the bottom here. So we could say that the introduction of CD-ROMs on a mass scale made for easy production of longer games, which in turn made for, perhaps, a male preference in these kinds of games because they were longer. Or we could say that the growth of publishers and the related growth of Polish translations led to increased accessibility. You didn't need to know English to play anymore, but also established a kind of a novelty, alluring novelty, because games such as Baldur's Gate were first to be such huge productions in Polish. Now, there is something else I would probably need to do here. There are some ways to find out about the gaming culture that I haven't employed, but one of them has been pointed out to me in a review. There is an article by Graham Kirkpatrick about the magazines of the 1980s and 1990s in the UK. Graham Kirkpatrick is using the theory and methodology of the theory, mostly perhaps, of Pierre Bourdieu, a French scholar, also one could say a cultural sociologist, and I would like to use this example to illustrate the fact that in cultural sociology there are probably many scholars like Pierre Bourdieu, like Wendy Griswold, like Richard Peterson, like others, whom we might look to in order to perhaps adopt the theories and methods. I think that Kirkpatrick's article and Kirkpatrick's further work has a potential to bridge this kind of gap between cultural sociology and game studies. I think there is a gap. And also, I hope that the kind of approach that I've been attempting to show in this paper is a way that we could use as game scholars in order to study historical cultural artifacts which are games. And I think that's a good, optimistic note to end on. So, thank you for your attention.